Hi, everybody. This is Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week we have Alyn with us. She's a Polymath author and researcher. She's also a podcaster, and she had me on her show, and I was so intrigued by her work that I begged her to come on, and she's awesome, so she did. And what is her work? Well, her work focuses on making complex ideas accessible, including how different worldviews shape our understanding of the inner and outer world. So what a perfect guest for Coffin Talk. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
Yeah, so we met on this site that sometimes is hit and sometimes is missed, but with you it was definitely a hit, and I was floored to come on your podcast, and just for my audience's brief understanding, you read me like a book using astrology, so I plan to ask you a lot of questions about that. Before I do, though, we ask every guest, how old are you, where did you grow up, and what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
I am 32 years old. I'm from San Diego, California, and I'm a millennial.
Awesome. Perfect. Cool. And when did you get into astrology?
During COVID, so pretty recently.
What was the impetus?
Just searching for anything that I could get my hands on. I was in the middle of my PhD program and feeling pretty burnt out about it. Yet I would still consider myself a lifelong learner. So I figured there has to be something that I can stimulate my brain to be excited about learning again. And so I first came across the chakras, and then astrology was soon after.
Wow. Okay. So you just gave me 500 questions, but I'll try to be patient. First of all, what was your PhD program in?
I'm still in it.
Oh, you're still in it.
I'm finishing
my
dissertation.
Oh, wow.
Right now, but it's in education policy, reform, and evaluation.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, and I remember asking you on your show about psychology because you're incredibly good at it. So I'm starting to see all the little parts of the whole. Okay, the average person you meet in America today who's over 50 hears astrology and rolls their eyes thanks to hippies and just a lot of other movements, and also I would say a lot of misinformation. Younger people tend to skew less skeptical, in my opinion, based on this show and just my interactions, but it still is kind of a laughed at pseudoscience in our American culture. How do you, as somebody who is full of so much academic training and you're a polymath and you're brilliant, how do you explain to yourself and others why you like it?
Thank you so much for this question.
Cool.
Because it's something that I have really struggled with throughout this entire journey. When I first got into astrology, it was more to just prove it or to kind of, I wouldn't say poke fun at it, but I kind of took it like another personality test. And as a kid, I loved taking personality quizzes, whether on BuzzFeed or actually the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, so it was just a way to better understand myself. So there's a tool out there, I'm going to try it. And then if I don't like it, I can always not use it. That's the great thing about tools, right? Mm-hmm. So once I got into it, it just really helped me understand myself. And then now, kind of looking at it from a bird's eye view, I can see that astrology really just stems from patterns. So something happens and we tell a story about it. Look at our fables or myths. They're just stories. And so astrology is a grand collection of stories that has been broken up into different frameworks. So it's through the zodiac signs, the houses, and the planets, mm-hmm. and how they line up tells a story. And so that's how I was able to read you like a book, because it wasn't me doing it. I was just reading what it said on the chart, just where the stars were and how that energy aligned that has come out into you.
That's so cool. So this is how I kind of try to explain it to people, but my background is very, very different. I've never been out to vilify or prove that it's correct so much as I'm always out to defend myself against everyone laughing at me. So I just want to say that before I explain this. But everyone believes in energy. I've never found a single person, no matter how skeptical they are, who doesn't believe in energy. So I just explain there's a lot of energy, and we're born at a time where energy is in that moment frozen. And I just say there's a lot of do you believe in gravity? Do you believe in the lunar cycles and the moon? Do you believe in oceans ebbing and flowing? If you believe in all of that, then you believe in an energy that has a relationship to planetary motions. And then I just say, and that's as far as I can understand. So I'm just curious, since you took it a step further, does my pseudo fake weird explanation somewhat hold water with you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that everything's an energy, everything's a frequency. And so, of course, it's going to, like, this is a good way to think about it.
Hmm.
It's like a grand song. And so you need the percussion, you need the violin, the trumpets, the saxophone. There are all these different things, every different, like, their own energy
Hmm.
patterns that come together and to create a unifying, in this case, astrology, a person. And so the energies of where the planets aligned when you were born, that's how it comes out into your personality. Does that
That's
make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And also, it's hard to explain because like I'm a believer, but I'm also a believer that like at any moment everything I believe in could be completely proven false, but also it could also be proven true. Like I'm very open minded to just how much I've read about history and seen how many like paradigm shifts there are and how those are based on social acceptance, less on fact. So I kind of look at astrology as like this thing that was very much accepted and still is in like the Yodish Vedic cultures, and then also, you know, like a lot of things, like people just take what they like and then bring it to America and make a capitalist version of it. Not everyone. I'm not like s talking all of America, but you know that can happen and did happen with astrology. So there's also like that. Like a lot of my friends will be, oh, I looked in the newspaper and there's 12 different people every day and they have like one horoscope, and I'm like, no, that's just like a silly thing in the newspaper. But what you said about a symphony and just like all the orchestration and instruments and everything makes sense to me. And then I would um, if I'm skipping something important to you, you can slow me down. But have
Okay,
you?
then can I
Yeah,
interject
please.
right here
Yeah,
really fast? That that is the one misconception that I really want to get out there about astrology is exactly what your friend says. It's not possible that everybody who's a Leo sun is going to have the same day.
hmm,
And even just horoscope astrology is also I'm very skeptical of, because everybody can use that energy in whatever way that they please.
mm,
The way that I like a song may not be how you like a song. It's going to be different. The different energies are going to affect us differently. So how can somebody predict what it's going to be like, and much less in umbrella terms? But the thing is that that's the only face of astrology in pop culture.
yeah,
So it's really about diving deep into it and reading where all the planets were, where are the houses, where, like, the three different things that I talked about, because that's how you get the real story of you instead of just this umbrella. Um, it's kind of like the horoscopes are like the weathermen of astrology, and so sometimes the weathermen can get it wrong.
yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because like when you were doing my chart and we were going through it live, it's not like you were saying like, oh, and I see here that you had an accident when you were 13, and like you know you weren't like at any point overly or underly trying to like prove the efficacy of it. You were just like earnestly and intelligently looking at things, remembering what you've learned about it. And then also I would say this, you don't have to, you were using some of your intuition, which is like a real thing to me. And that's why I said like, oh, you're really good at psychology too, because to me anyone can like learn how to do a horoscope, but I've seen enough astrologers, and you're one of them, that I know the good ones are definitely bringing more to the table than just that. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I would say that I am using my intuition. One time I did an event and they offered the event coordinator offered me some alcohol, and I drink, so I said for sure, like, it was a nice little margarita.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, my intuition was off. I couldn't, like, I feel like I couldn't do my job properly
Yeah.
because the alcohol was interfering, and it was just the most bizarre experience that I've ever had with trying to be an astrologer under the influence. So yeah, definitely, I think that the intuition is a big thing in there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And actually that kind of segues into like another question I wanted to ask you, which is what is your greatest like surprising triumph since like you entered into astrology in COVID? Like meaning like a person you helped a lot, maybe even with yourself. Is there just any moment that sticks out to you?
The first thing that popped into my head was myself,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know how broken I was
Mm.
until I started doing this work, where I feel like I did a really good job of covering it up. Like, oh, I'm getting my PhD, I'm getting married, I had like all these like out external things to be proud of, when on the inside I was a complete mess, and I would have had no idea if it wasn't for doing this deep inner work. And I've been staring at my chart for over 4 years now, and it's so cool how every time it still teaches me something that I didn't have the words for, that maybe it was a feeling that I couldn't really process because I didn't have the terminology to understand it fully. And so it has really been a tool with that.
That's so cool. That's really cool. And So I'm going to open up a little bit about like my background with astrology to relate the next question to you, which is that I was raised by parents who I call hippies, but I always make sure to tell people they weren't like protest hippies. They didn't care about politics. They weren't like, they were just hippies, meaning like they meditated and they kind of shunned like some of the Western paths, but they also like had jobs. My dad got a law degree. Like it's not like they bucked capitalism or like the West or anything. So, but it was still weird to be raised by these people in like a mostly Christian community because I had like no religion. And if I thought about what is a religion, I would have just said like meditating. Like that was, and with that came astrology. So at a young age, my dad took me to a super world famous astrologer who's actually now deceased. His name is Chakrapani and he lived in the LA area. And that was like life changing. But what I'm going to try to relate, because it's related to you talking about marriage, is that like everyone's horoscope, and I'm speaking only about Yodish astrology, Vedic, not about Western because I don't know anything about it, but they can predict like the likelihood of your marriages and your failure in marriage. And so he said, and remember I was like 18 and I like didn't have a girlfriend or anything. And he's like, oh, certain you're going to get a divorce. And I was like, okay, like that's dark and weird. And then I didn't think anything of it. And then I saw someone else 7 years later and they said, oh, very certain you're going to get a divorce. And then I saw a third person years later and they said the exact same thing. And then, yes, I did end up getting a divorce. And I just find it fascinating that I actually went out of my way to not fulfill that. Like I stayed in the marriage longer than I knew I should. And I was like trying to fight it. And now that I'm through it all and I'm remarried and I'm like fully in love and I have wonderful kids with, in this marriage and everything, it all makes sense. And I see why I actually had to get divorced. It's not like it was a choice. It like this marriage wouldn't work without that. So I'm curious, because you were talking about marriage and stuff. Do you see that kind of stuff when you do charts, or are you not into that side of it?
I mean, I definitely know how, and it's up to like I said, the intuition's a big part. Like if the person that I'm reading wants to go in that deep, then we definitely can. But I really try, like how you said, to keep it specific enough where it relates to the person and relates to understanding them better, but that it's broad enough where there's still room, because I'm very much a big believer of free will.
Yeah, all three of them said you have free will. This doesn't have to happen, but they said like the same way, like it's very likely you're going to get hungry at some point today. It's extremely likely you're going to marry the wrong person and have to learn a lot of lessons from that. And they even have a joke in astrology in India where they literally, this is not like, I'm not making this up, people who are really into this, they'll marry a tree and then divorce it to avoid the real life divorce of the human. And I have no follow-up to that, like with stories. So my follow-up question to you is, do you ever get, and this is my word choice, in the weeds about yourself? Like, do you ever start to get like too micromanagerial with yourself? Like, for example, if I was you and I was able to see a divorce, would that like freak you out, or do you just kind of tend to do other people?
Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
So the way that I would say, I think that it could be like with that tree example. I've been doing a lot of research on dreams. And so I have another podcast called Grounded Spirits, and I'm doing like a whole deep dive on like how to dream. And I have like guided journals to help with that. But in my research with dreams, it's that things happen in your dreams so that it doesn't happen in real life if you don't want it to. So like if you really didn't want it, maybe you kept having dreams about divorce, then it'd be like the separation of who you are, because everybody's just a reflection of you too.
Yeah.
So there could have been, it was for sure there was going to be a divorce, but it didn't necessarily have to be within a marriage.
Yeah.
Is how I would read it for myself or for anybody else.
Cool. Laura, you're so mature. I cannot like ever wrap my mind around it. It's hard to explain, but you have a spiritual maturity. You have like a real like bedrock focus on like, don't let these things sway me, but like you're very human too. So I'm intrigued by this combination. What is it like to be a polymath and interview polymaths and be like in this world and also be doing podcasting? Because I don't get the feeling, unlike a lot of us, and I'm referring to myself, that you're really into like the entertainment business, that like you like grew up like, I want to be a podcaster. Like, I mean, you're pursuing a PhD. So like, what about it? What about like going public with these two interests of yours is it for you?
So I'm going to answer this in two ways.
Okay.
The first one is actually really funny because my whole life, all I wanted to do was be an actress. And so when I was like 4 to like 8, I would beg my mom to take me to auditions. But then it came a time where we had to move to LA to pursue it. And my mom said no. So we had to stay in San Diego, and that was crushing my dreams. And I still wanted to pursue it. Like in college, I went to Pepperdine, so it wasn't too far from LA. But then my mom said, "Oh, well, you can't be smart and famous. You have to pick one." And I don't think she said it in those words. She probably like said just like little comments here and there that I have now internalized as this statement. And so that's why I was like, okay, fine. Like I'm gonna work really hard on my academics, and so then I can be famous.
That's so cool. It's funny because it all adds up. Because you're very good at it, and you're very good at it. Like you're a consummate professional from the minute you booked me and I was on your show and everything, and like even on this show, because this is different. You're a guest. It's like a different feel, and but at the same time, you just have this like just the facts approach that I love. So that's cool. That was really interesting. So what is an acting role you would like dream to have, like on Broadway or in a movie? Like if you were in like a reboot or something, like what's a role that people would know of?
How interesting. Maybe this is why it's never happened, is because I have no idea. I've never even thought that far ahead to have a dream like that. But I will say that I do have like a lot of movie ideas where I would want to be the actress. For instance, my book Monterey, as I wrote that book, I intended it to be like I'm the main character. It's written in the first person. It's like a journal. But in the book, her name is Reina Villaseca. And so with Reina, like I would love to actually play her like on like a series and go through this underground world of Monterey as her. But I think that would be the only, I haven't thought of like an actual show or movie or anything like that.
That's so cool. I'm also interested in talking about this, particularly the entertainment industry and acting and everything. I'm 43, you're 32. So like when you said I grew up like with BuzzFeed, like I didn't grow up with BuzzFeed, but it came out when I was in like my 20s, I think, or maybe 30s. But my point is, filmmaking, movies, acting, all of this has changed and is changing. You're younger than me, so I'm asking you for your perspective. Where do you see all this going? Like, do you think Hollywood is going to like eventually just go bankrupt and it's just going to be a bunch of independent people making YouTubes? Or do you think we're still going to have like a monoculture industry with like entertainment specifically?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because one of the companies that I'm working on, it's called Bellisby Productions, and it's a mixture of the two that you're talking about. So Bellisby would be like the intellectual Disney in a way, like cool. Everything that we do will come out, will have like a lesson in the end or have something to make you think and to have it be like thought-provoking. But anyway, so that's what cool. I want it to be is for anybody who wants to get into acting or wants to get into like publishing a book. Like I've published over 10 books. So like I already know the process of how to publish a book. And so I'm specifically focusing on books and eventually going out into the others. But with Bellisby, I want it to be that they own their work, that everything that's going on with Taylor Swift, that it's her work, so why can't she have it? And it's all these legalities. But I don't think that should be the case. I think if you're the artist, it should be your work. And I don't want it to have this like infringing like corporation taking away those rights or the money. So it'd be like obviously there's still going to be some royalties like for the company because how is it going to grow? But I'm really into helping people get into their individual and owning their work and being able to book roles and do all of these. But you still need something to back it. You need that foundation. And so that foundation is what Bellisby would provide, where we would have the infrastructure to make a movie. Or like right now it would be, I'm thinking too broad right now. Right now we're only on how to publish a book, and I can do that very well. So that's where it is right now.
Wow.
Did I answer your question though?
It totally answered my question. It also just every time you answer a question, you lead to like 15 more because you're like you do way too many things. I don't even understand how you have time to be you. It's very impressive. It's cool too because this is another thing that I like exploring the show. The reason I ask what generation people are from and their age, it's very specific. It's because I feel like the media is trying very hard to splinter us and to make us convinced that we're all very different and we have nothing in common and this generation hates that generation, whereas I just see nothing like that. I see humans, and humans like to argue, and some humans have personalities that clash, but I can meet a millennial who hates technology and I can meet a millennial who loves technology. Like I don't see it all. So when you start talking about like companies and the role they play and the profit taking, and you bring up Taylor Swift and other things, you hit like the wheelhouse that I'm in, which is I'm trying to defend companies because without their capital to begin with, it's hard to like amass popularity and success. And then also I'm trying to defend the individual, the Taylor Swift, the artist, because they deserve a lion's share, but not all of the profits. So I like the way you described it. I am curious, like, do you think this can happen organically, the movement you and I both want to see, or do you think there has to be like legislation to cap profits and things like that?
No, I think it happened naturally. I think that legislation, so it's actually, this question has come with me the whole time, ever since I took the GRE.
Mm-hmm.
So in the GRE, the question was, do you think that laws change people or that people change laws?
Wow.
And I have just thought about this for over 10 years now, that I don't think that laws can do anything. Laws could be like a dam, like a beaver's dam.
Mm-hmm.
But if a huge wave comes through, it's gonna disappear. So I think that it really has to be with the people and has to happen organically. And interesting that I brought up a wave, because also in my book Monterey, she's in this river and she keeps hearing the voice saying surrender, surrender, but she can't do it. Like she doesn't feel safe being in this stream and this river. But I think in life you have to go with the flow, because there's not much that we have in our control other than being ourselves.
Yeah. Wow. What are you like when you're not confident and not so assured? Like, I know you have it, and I'm not trying to embarrass you, but like, I want you to describe yourself. Would you say you're an optimist, a pessimist, a realist? What word would you use with the IST as the suffix?
If there's like a connectedness,
No?
like somebody who brings everything together. And
Okay.
that's why I feel like I've really gravitated towards polymath,
Mm-hmm.
because polymathy just means loving a little of everything. And so I think right now in my life, I'm finally putting everything that I love into like a sausage grinder, and like finally coming out with one product of me, of who I am. And so thank you so much for calling me confident, because that's something I've been working on for a very long time.
That's so cool. No, and I really do mean it. And I say this a lot on this podcast, and I'm going to keep saying it. It's so fun to meet someone and get to know them in the podcasting format. And I don't care like how weird it sounds to other people, but I suggest to everyone that they do it. And actually, I hear podcasters say this who are phenomenally famous. They're like, every single person should start a podcast because of the therapeutic and friendship value it brings. And this is like a great example of it. Do you experience the same thing often with the two podcasts you're doing now?
Yeah, I think that also going back to the question that you asked, if it's going to be all individuals or through a company, I think that you're still going to have the companies, but every single individual has a story. And so that is something that I'm working on with Bella Spree as well, is that telling those individual stories, that it's not just about the academic knowledge in the ivory tower that has all to say, that every person has a story. And so definitely like make the podcast, write the book, do whatever you can to express yourself, and just getting it out there. I always think about the history books. Like I want to know about the everyday person, not about these kings and queens. You know, I want to know what the life was like for every single person. So
yeah. I took a history course in grad school called The Narratives of the Underclass, and it's about the unwritten history that we're never going to be able to tell, because until now, no one even cared and no one wrote it. So all we have is like Charles Dickens' version of it. You know, like we have like literature tales of what poverty was like, but we don't really know. And then we have a couple, slavery narratives, like things like that. But even that example is recent. That's from like the 1800s. So it's crazy how much we don't know about what the average person's life was like for eons. Speaking of which, social media is the weirdest thing that's ever come out in my life. I'm not saying it's the worst or best. It's just the weirdest. I never saw it coming, and it still doesn't make sense to me. For me, social media tends to produce lower self-esteem, so I try to stay off of it. And it's because even if I don't want to, I can't help but notice how much praise or like, whatever something gets that I post, and then like there's like tricks to it, and I just don't want to fall into that. But at the same time, I'm also trying to self-promote and like run a career. I know you run into the same thing, but because you're younger and different and cool and all that, I'm just curious, like, what is your relationship with social media, and do you have advice for other people?
Yeah, so I just took a workshop with Whitney Euland, and she does this whole like how to be famous boot camp, and how to tap into celebrity energy. And so what she was saying is that it's about feeling safe being seen. And so I think that has been major thing with me. I had a video go viral on TikTok where I'm just planting plants, and there was no reason for it to get to 1.7 million views.
Wow.
When none of my other stuff had anything like that, but it did, and it was just because I was just being myself, planting plants. But the thing is that I was safe for people to see because it wasn't my thoughts, because I have thought that I was just so weird for having all of these different thoughts, or even like getting into spiritual stuff. My first book that I published was about sex because I was just so embarrassed to talk about spirituality that I had to put out the sex book to be like, okay, I'm like going into this water already being a little out of the norm and then hitting with the spirituality after. But it has just been such a journey to even feel safe within my own self that I think with social media, it's about feeling safe out there. And that's where a lot of people have trouble with. And especially with me, like just this week, even though it's the beginning of the week, but these last couple of weeks have been a time for me to really understand who do I want to be on social media. And then I'll be able to really tap into content. Some advice that I would offer too is to have a main question that we're at the core of every single person. There's something that we wonder about, something that we want to know. So put that on social media and just film yourself taking this journey of figuring out this question. And then there you go, there's your content. And so the hard part is coming up with that question. So that's what I've been working on.
Wow, that's cool. That was a very interesting answer. And it's also interesting too, because we were talking about like companies and how they make money, and like ironically, you got nothing for that TikTok video and they got so much money from that. And it's hard to like quantify or explain that to someone who doesn't study the economics of like social media, but like that doesn't make me mad. I'm not saying like TikTok's a terrible company, but it is interesting that like the vehicle that we can use to get success can also take from us the whole time without ever giving back. Like there's famous examples, but also like once you're established, you still like need like a microphone or a mouthpiece. So there's like legacy media and social media. But I do find all this interesting, and what you said about laws really helped me, because I do wonder as we advance towards like another election, I don't care which one it is, it could be 2016, 20, 24, 28, it doesn't matter, they're all getting more and more absurd in my lifetime. And like I am starting to wonder, like, will there be an organic movement of just humanity, of just people, like, loving each other, realizing that it's better to not fight and argue, and it's better to try to, like, bring context to arguments and stuff. Astrologically, do you ever look at, like, the astrology for, like, our planet, for, like, our cultures, for our country and things like that? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Right now, the United States is going through its like Pluto return. So that means that Pluto is the planet of transformation. And so it's a 248 year, I believe, cycle. Yeah, so that's where we're at right now. So that's where we're seeing a lot of things that were okay 240 some odd years ago are happening again. But this time I don't think that it's trying to get away from like Britain. Now it's like trying to get away from the overbearing companies. And so that's why it has to be grassroots. It has to be person to person. And that's how we're going to have this, like, people say that there's like a spiritual war. I don't necessarily know if we're going to go that far, but there's definitely this kind of like revolution in the air. And it's not going to be like actual war killing. It's going to be more intellectual. Yeah.
And when you talked about like whether or not we're going to die, what do you think happens to you when you die?
Oh yeah, it doesn't affect me at all, with astrology. So this part, you earlier you mentioned that I have the spiritual maturity, and it's because for every day for 2 years, I would wake up and just go outside and just allow my mind to go free. And so it would feel like I had these lessons where I would like notice different things, or I would just like really tune into my intuition and really allow her. And I think could be like my higher self. You could even say like the universe or anything like that, where I would focus on different things about myself and really get into it. And so, of course, I would always ask, like, what happens when we die, or what happens after? And really just go down that rabbit hole. And so it had nothing really to do with astrology. So it's really hard to explain, because the only reason that we know the difference between today and tomorrow is because of this time that we have. But after we die, there is no time. So everything is everywhere all at once. And So when we die, we get to see every single moment of our lives and every single moment after our life. So when someone dies and you feel a family member, it's at that same time, like right after they die, in our understanding. But with them, they see everything at every time, at every moment. So even in 200 years, if they wanted to come visit, they would have seen that right after they die. And that's also why they say that life flashes before your eyes, because you're seeing all these different things all at once, but you're actually experiencing them. You're not just seeing them, like you're actually there at each moment. Oh, but then this is how the cool like heaven and hell thing happens, because if it's all beautiful things, then you're going to feel this state of euphoria. You're going to be so happy, like, wow, I got to do all of this. And then this is all the impact that I was able to create, whether within the family or within the community or the world. But if it was awful and you didn't like your choices and you didn't like what you were doing, then of course it's going to be like a hell.
Wow. That was the most profound answer. I've been doing this show. This is like episode 196. And that was, it wasn't mind blowing. And I'm going to explain why. I'm not trying to take you down a notch. It's the opposite. It's like you used words to explain something I've been getting closer to thinking is true and realizing. But like you expressed it with the timelessness thing in a way that finally pierced through that part of me that has trouble seeing that. So I not only really agree with you, but I'm kind of mind blown. Everyone who's listening at home, Laura Alyn is very findable online. I will have in the notes links to both of her podcasts and anything else she wants to include. And the best way to support our show is to head over to MikeyOp.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com and sign up for the free once a week letter that I write. Thank you again. My name is Mike Oppenheim, and we will see you soon.